Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today, I'm going to release a build that somebody asked me if I was going to do an update to, and originally I wasn't, but I did some testing with it, and I really like the outcome in the Wrathstone DLC with the new racial changes, and I have to say that I was quite surprised when I got this build finalized and put it together and was testing it and was running around with it. I was just like, wow, this is really powerful. A lot more powerful than I expected it to be. And so here it is. This is the new and improved Lord Knight solo build. Now, if you guys don't know what a solo build is, it is a build that is made for soloing content. That means soloing overland, public dungeons, delves, world bosses, dolmens, abyssal geysers, you name it, it can solo it all. But it can also solo normal and veteran dungeons that don't require 2 players. If it does require 2 players, you can use one of my other solo builds. And you can 2-man most of the dungeons on veteran. The DLC dungeons can be a little bit more difficult, but you can do 2-man through most of the DLC normal mode dungeons. On the veteran, you do require more of a group. But you can play this even as a tank if you wanted to. You might have to make some adjustments to the skills. But it can tank as well. All you have to do is change the food to the long fin pasty and melon sauce. As you can see, we got a 25k health, which is actually more than enough with the way this build is set up to tank most dungeons in veteran mode, even most of the DLC dungeons. You just have to be a really skilled player. If you're a skilled player, you could easily tank with this. So, but let's go ahead and get into it. Taking a look at our stats here, we have an 11,992 magicka, 24,603 health, 30,005 stamina, which is actually quite surprising. Usually I can only get to about 28, 29k. Now I get to 30,000 with the Nord, and the Nord is definitely a little OP for this. So we do have a 893 magic recovery with a 949 stam recovery. The thing you have to understand about playing solo is it's a lot different than playing in a group. You have to rely on your own self-reliance. So you have to have survivability, you have to have resource management, and good damage. So you have to have a mix of everything. So you have to be tanky, you have to be damage capable, you have to be self-reliant. You are not relying on other people to help you, you are playing alone. So as you can see, we have 2547 weapon damage with a 45% weapon critical. It will not get higher than that. That is as high as your weapon crit gets, but that's all you need to do pretty much any of the content in the game. And yes, this build does also work in Maelstrom Arena, but if you do not know Maelstrom Arena, this is a good build to start with doing Maelstrom Arena, because it'll help you learn the mechanics of Maelstrom really well. Is it capable of completing Maelstrom? Yes. Will it get scores? No. It'll just help you complete it. And yes, you can do it on both normal and veteran with this build. Spell resist is coming in 24,000. Physical resist is 23,903. Really, really good. And when you buff up, just so you guys can see, your resistances go to 32, 31. That's almost cap. And that's really good. This is going to put you at a really high resistance for that high survivability. And you're also getting stamina back along with your stam recovery. Now I am going to show you what happens when you use a tripod with this, because that's the kind of potions you want to use, is tripods. Oops. As you can see, we have 1,050 mag recovery and 1,116 stamina recovery. Now I will say this. If you want to play a different race, then I would suggest using a different monster set. Probably the Bloodspawn set, because that'll give you ultimate, it's going to give you stam recovery, it's going to give you extra resistances that you won't get if you're not a Nord. So it's a nice trade-off. Moving on down though, we are running the Thief Mundus Stone for the extra weapon and spell critical. You want to have a higher weapon and spell critical because of one of the sets you're using. You want to be able to crit. So having that 45% is going to be really important. Next, we have Major Savagery on both bars. We do have the Warriors, Hunters, can't even think what it's called. Evil Hunter on both bars, so we get the extra Major Savagery. Like I said, this is self-sufficient. You've got to be able to rely on yourself. If you're using potions to give yourself the crit and weapon damage, you can do that if you're a highly skilled player. If you are not, this works out better. Moving on down, we are using Dubious Cameron Throne. You can use Artan Takeaway Broth. It's really expensive to buy, and it's really expensive to craft if you're buying materials. If you're farming materials, you can easily make it yourself, but it will take you a long time to get the materials together to craft you enough of it to make it last a long time. Dubious Cameron Throne is really cheap. You can buy it off the marketplace, usually really cheap, and you can get a lot of it. Excuse me. Gotta clear my lungs here. So, Dubious Cameron Throne is really good for this. Alright, moving on to the gear. And looking at the sets. Starting with the main monster set, we are, and just to let you know, if you want to use this as a tank, use the Tri-Stat food and Dubious Cameron Throne when you're soloing, and then carry tripods. Moving over the sets, though, starting with the first set, we have Celine's. Celine's is great for this because, one, it gives you 1,000 extra stamina, and number two, when you deal direct melee damage, you have a 15% chance to call a Primal Spirit that mauls the closest enemy in front of you for 1.3 seconds, dealing 15,120 physical damage. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds, and let me tell you, if you have enough dots, this will just be firing off continuously. We have 2, and if you have your Dawnbreaker out, it'll fire it off even more, so you can have 3 dots. But we are using a 2-handed axe to get another bleed in there to get some extra damage and stuff. So it's kind of nice. The next set we are using is, of course, Night Mothers. Night Mothers is just my go-to for solo play. It is just amazing, and if I'm doing 2-handed tanking, it's another, like, it's the set that I would use. The 2 and 4 piece are crit, the 3 piece is weapon damage, but the 5 piece, when you deal critical damage, you apply Major Fracture to the enemy, reducing physical resistance by 5,280 for 6 seconds. Now this applies to any enemies you deal critical damage to. So any enemies you're dealing critical damage to, they will get that Major Fracture. That's why it's such a powerful set for solo play. But it's also a really good set in group play if your group doesn't have a lot of Major Fracture being applied to a lot of targets. So, next but not least, this is the set that somebody actually suggested it a while ago, and I took a look at it and I was like, yeah, it's not too bad. But I didn't really test it until, like, Murkmire, and then I just started testing it more on Murkmire, and I just find this to be a really good set for solo play, and that is the Nightmare set. The 2-piece gives you extra physical resist. So on a on a Templar or on a DK, this set is amazing because it gives you that extra physical resist, which compensates for the spell resist you get for being one of those 2 classes. Now, if you're any other class type, you're going to have a lot more physical resist than you do magic resist. So it's kind of like, it works really good for, like I said, DKs and Templars, because they already get that extra resistances in their passives. So this kind of fills in that minor gap. That's why the resistances are so close to each other here. Otherwise, this would be like 21k, this would be like 24. That's why I like this set, is it like I said, it gives you that offset balance. Next up, the 3-piece gives you max health. The 4-piece gives you some extra weapon damage, and that's really good. Getting that extra weapon damage is going to allow you to deal more damage. So, and then when you deal melee damage, you have a 20% chance to apply Minor Maim to all enemies within 8 meters of you for 5 seconds, reducing their damage done by 15%. Again, this is why it's a really good set. It applies minor maim. This will reduce incoming damage on you, which makes your shields last longer, and it keeps the damage coming in less. So it's going to give you good survivability, good crowd capability, like crowd control capabilities and stuff like that, because you're applying that minor maim. And that minor maim is an 8-meter radius, so that's a pretty big space around you. That's bigger than your buff right here. This is I think it's a 5-meter range around you, so it would reach 3 meters more than this. So it's a really good set. Now let's go over the traits and enchants on the gear. So on the big pieces, all infused. So head, chest, and legs is infused with tri-stat glyphs. This is just going to give you more magicka, health, and stamina, which you really need. So you really need those, the more health, you need that more magicka, you need that more stamina. So using those tri-stat glyphs in those 3 bigger pieces is going to give you more. In the smaller pieces, we are running max stamina. This is just going to increase your stamina pool across the board. And then on the traits on the smaller pieces, the belt and the gloves are Nirnhoned. This is just to boost your resistances more. And then on the shoulder and leg shoulders and boots, we're running reinforced. And this again is to boost your resistances. So your resistances are really high, so your survivability is better. Now you can do this in medium if you want to. Run a medium build. You will have a lot lower resistances, but you still get a good amount of survivability. Your max health also drops quite a bit, so it is capable in medium armor. And you will end up with some more weapon damage and a higher critical if you are running medium armor. Alright, moving on to the jewelry. We are running 2 healthy nightmare rings, with weapon damage, and then we are running an infused necklace with magic recovery. You've got to be able to keep your shield, one of your shields up, and in order to do that, you got to have a good magic return. So this is why we have that magic recovery there. And then moving on down to the weapons, we are running a 2-handed weapon, 2-handed axe, and this has a chance of proccing a bleed, just so you know. And so that's why I chose the axe, is just to get that extra dot damage in there to help us with just killing enemies faster. So, and then and we are running an absorb stamina here. You can use almost whatever enchant you want here. You could even use like an absorb magicka. You could use fire, lightning, frost, poison, disease. You could even use a crusher here, or a hardening if you wanted. But I prefer the absorb stamina. It does help you deal a little bit more damage, and it gives you stamina back, which is really nice. On the back bar, we are using a weapon damage enchant. Of course we are. This is going to allow us to do get more weapon damage to boost our damage, so we can kill things quicker. So really, really nice again. And that's pretty much it for the gear. Let's move on to the skills. Going over the passives, make sure you unlock all, and I do mean all of your class passives. It's really important, because when you solo play, there is going to be times where you might want to use a different skill for different situations. In some cases, I might want to use this so I can remove negative effects from myself. The heal's going to be small, I know that, but at least I can remove negative effects for myself in those situations where I need to do that. Most of the time I don't, because my self-healing is just keeps the damage off of me. So, weapon passives, 2-handed, make sure you get them all, and bow, make sure you get them all. Now you can play this with dual wield as well. If you are going to play this build with dual wield, I'm going to tell you now, you will be using Deadly Cloak and Twin Slashes, but you're also going to need room for Resolving Vigor on your bar. You will not be using a lot of things. You will use one enchant infused hardening, the other one infused absorb stamina. This way you can get a shield while you're on this on the dual wield bar. So it's not very powerful, but you can do it. Bow, make sure you get all the passives, and then moving on to armor. Light armor, you want to get the top 3 medium armor, you want to get the top 2 and the bottom 1. These are just for the passives that they offer you. These really help you out in the long run. Heavy armor, all the passives, because we are wearing a 5-piece of heavy armor setup. We're wearing 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium. And to show where this is, the helm is medium, the belt is light, the rest of it's all heavy. And this is just to give us that greater survivability. World skills, again, you can be a werewolf with this build. It's pretty nice. I'm not gonna lie, it is actually pretty nice, but I prefer to play it with just the race stuff. Vampires, not too bad, and if you're in a fire situation, it can be really bad. Soul magic, always, I forget to do this sometimes when I'm doing a build. Make sure you get these 2, no matter if you're solo playing or whatever, these 2 are very important. On to your guild skills. Fighter guild, all the passives. Mage's guild, you just want persuasive will. Psijic order, get all the passives. And then Undaunted, you want to get the Undaunted passives. Now, like I said, you can solo with this build, even if you don't have the Undaunted passives. Your stats will be a little bit lower. But you can do dungeons on normal and do the stories and get them out of the way, so you can unlock the Undaunted passives. So, this is actually how I get Undaunted for my characters. I play a build like this on most of the classes, and I just solo the dungeons, get my Undaunted, and go about my business. Moving on to Alliance. You don't need any passives from here. Racial, Nord, all the passives. On to crafting passives. I always get medicinal use and provisioning on most of my characters, just so I have the extra length of time for food, and then the quicker cooldown on potions. It just helps out a lot, especially if you're solo playing. So, and that is that for that passive stuff. Now we're going to go over the skills on a bar, and I will tell you, you can change some of these out if you want to. Starting with the first skill, we have Crushing Weapon. This is a Psijic Order skill. It does a good amount of damage, but the way it works is you activate it, and when you do your light attack, this will deal an additional amount of damage, and it'll heal you for 27% of the damage done. If the power is not consumed in time, you regain a portion of the resources spent. So if you do not use it within 2 seconds of activation, you get a portion of that resource back. Next up, we have Brawler. Brawler, of course, is here for the damage over time, but it's mainly here for the shield to give you more survivability. Again, I know a lot of people question this all the time. Why do you use Brawler? Why do you use Brawler? It's the shield. It's literally the shield. It's survivability. When you solo play, you need to be survivable. If you're not a skilled player, this kind of setup is really good for you. It helps you learn mechanics really well. It helps you understand how those mechanics work. It does take you longer to kill things, but at least you can kill things and survive. And it, like I said, it helps you learn mechanics. Next ability we have is Blazing Shield. Now this isn't a requirement. You can also use the Undaunted Bone Shield, but if you don't have access to this right away, it's better to use this. So, but this will give you a shield for 34% of your max health. It also grows in strength by 4% for each enemy near you, and then when it expires, when it's removed, it will explode, dealing 34% of the damage back to the enemies, and it can also proc your Aedric Spear passive, Burning Light, which will do 4,289 physical damage. Unless your rally is up, I think it will do more. Yeah, it does a little bit more physical damage. And so this won't do that much more, but also your Brawler does more, and Crushing Weapon does more when you have your rally up, which is our next ability. So rally is a very powerful buff. It gives you your major brutality. On top of that, it's going to give you health every 2 seconds. And when it expires, it's going to heal you for 6,250. When it expires or when you reactivate it. Now, the final heal, that 6,000 something, will be boosted by 564% for the portion of time or length that Rally has been active. So, if I leave Rally running for the full duration, I'll get like only almost 20k health back. And if I have this down, I'll actually get more out of Rally, because this will give me 8% healing, or minor minning. So it's 8% healing done. So my heals are actually healing for more. But if I let my Rally almost expire, as you can see, I just got 18k health back. So this is a super powerful heal, heal that'll keep you alive through pretty much any content. Your shields will pretty much absorb most of the damage 90% of the time. And the reason I use Crushing Weapon is so if I block, I can get a 5k shield, almost 6k shield from it. My Brawler gives me a small shield, and then this gives me another shield. So altogether I get a 16, almost 17k shield. Now when I'm fighting enemies, depending on how many mobs I'm fighting, the shield can go up to as high as 40, 50k. With all my shields up. Next ability we have is Evil Hunter. We have this here for the major savagery. Now, in some dungeon situations, you will see enemies go invisible. If you activate this while you're in a dungeon, it will make those invisible enemies seen. You don't use it too often. I'm mainly only slot this mainly because I do a lot of PvP as well, and this build does work in PvP quite well. So, without any changes, you don't have to change a thing on it. You don't need impin gear, none of that, because you have super high resistances, you have all this other stuff, and then on top of that, you have shields that absorb a ton of damage. So, next ability we have, and we have this here because we use it, and that is Dawnbreaker. Dawnbreaker is an awesome ability. One, it gives you increased physical damage, because it increases your weapon damage by 5% while slotted. But it does physical damage up front, and it does a lot of damage over time, over 5 seconds. It's just a really powerful ability to have. So I use this pretty much whenever it's off cooldown. Next abilities on our bar is our bow bar, and we have Venom Arrow. Venom Arrow is really good, especially for range casters and things like that. You can hit them with this ability if they're casting, and it'll interrupt them, set them off balance, and stun them for 3 seconds. But otherwise, we just have this here because it deals damage, and it deals damage over time. Next ability we have is Endless Hail. This is here to just do damage over time. Also to keep our weapon damage enchant procced. So when from the bow. So as we're fighting enemies, we just proc the damage. Next ability, Power of the Light. Now this is... You can swap this out if you want for something else like Razor Caltrops or whatever. I just like this because it puts Minor Fracture, Minor Breach on the enemy, which allows me to do more damage. So I like that. On top of that, it does do damage up front, and then it absorbs damage. So it does damage at the end when it expires. So you just apply this, let it run out, and it'll deal damage as long as you're still dealing damage to that enemy. And it'll copy a maximum of 18,003 damage. Next ability we have is our buff for resistances. This ability will give you Major Ward, Major Resolve, which increases physical spell resistance, and this is the Restoring Focus. So this one also gives you stamina every second that it's active. So for 20 seconds, you're getting 240 stamina a second. So you actually end up with a lot of stamina in the long run. It's almost 5k stamina. And then standing within the ruin increases your physical resistance by 50%. So if you set this down, you can see we go to that 32, 31. But if we step out of it, we still maintain a 29, 29k resistance. So it's really good to stay within it or outside of it, because you're still going to have really high resistances. Again, Evil Hunter, mainly just for that crit, guys. We want to keep that high crit on both bars, so we have this here. And then the last ability we have this here if we ever need to hit something at ranged for a lot of damage, and that is Soul Assault. Soul Assault is a extremely powerful ability. As you can see, burn enemies from the inside with Soul Fire, dealing 44,996 damage over 3.5 seconds. Enemies affected by this ability are revealed for 2 seconds. So I use this in PvP, but I also use it in PvE a lot. So it's a just really powerful ability. And if you're wondering what this ability is, it is under the World Skills Soul Magic. It is the ultimate from there. You have to play through the main story which is the, like, if you've played the main game, it's called the Hooded Figure quest line. It takes you to meet the Prophet, Lear's Titanborn, and all of them. It's the one where you fight Molag Bal at the end, and you have to play through it and the campaign in Cold Harbor in order to unlock this. So you have to play through the main story, the main campaign, to unlock it. It takes a while, but it's definitely worth it. If you don't have this unlocked, just put Dawnbreaker back here as well. This is going to boost your weapon damage while you're on the back bars also, so it increases all your damage. But I like using Soul Assault. It's just a super powerful hitting ability. So, and it's super cheap on the ultimate cost. It's 96 ultimate. So, all right, now, before I go down here and fight this world boss that's here in Murkmire, and this is a Murkmire world boss, it's one of the most harder bosses in the game, but I will solo the boss, show you this in solo play so you guys can see how survivable it is, how easy it is to maintain. It's not hard. It's almost a cakewalk. But before we do, we got to take a look at the CP. Now, I just readjusted the CP because I was trying out some new things. And this is what I find works best. So, starting with the red tree, we have 66 in the Ironclad. This is going to reduce the damage taken from all direct damage attacks by 22%. Then we have 2 in the Spell Shield. Now, you will always have 2 points left over with the way this CP is set up. So you can either put it into Spell Shield or Heavy Armor Focus. It's up to you. But I like to put it into Spell Shield just to give me more spell resist, because you do take a lot more spell damage in most situations than you do physical. Moving on. We have 31 into Thick Skin. This reduces damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. And then we have 56 in Hardy, which reduces physical poison and disease damage by 12%. And then we have 56 into Elemental Defender. Sorry. Get those two confused all the time. But this reduces damage taken from Flame Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 12%. Now, just to let you guys know, these do stack with Thick-Skinned and Ironclad, so they do give you the extra damage reduction together. So those ones do stack up. So you're, like, if you get hit by a poison over time effect, it's actually reduced by 25%. So that's because of Thick-Skin and Hardy. And if you get hit by direct damage, it's 44%. So, depending on the type of direct damage it is. Now, moving on to over here, we do have 40 into Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. Now, what I will do is I will take this down to 10% if I'm doing PvP. This is the only change I make. And I will take those points and I will put them into here to give me reduced damage from light and heavy attacks. Because in PvP, you take a lot in light and heavy attacks in Cyrodiil, and in Battlegrounds you'll take a lot of light and heavy attacks. In Battlegrounds, this build is good. It's a little bit harder to play because you don't have the high recovery rates, so it can be off-putting in there. But then we have 19 into Quick Recovery. This increases healing received by 5%, and this also stacks with your armor one, which gives you the 8%, which is really cool. So, moving on to the green tree, we have 56 in a Warlord. This reduces break free cost by 20%. We have 5 into Sprinter. This gives you a 3% reduced sprint cost. And then we have 16 into Bashing Focus, because even as a solo player, you do bash. This gives you 10% reduced bashing costs. And then moving on over here, we have 43 into Mooncalf, 43 into Arcanus. Both of these give you recovery. One gives you 10% stam recovery. The other one gives you 10% magic recovery. And then we have 43 into Tenacity. This gives you increased Magicka or Stamina return on your fully charged heavy attacks. So in heavy armor, you get 30% baseline in your return of recovery. And then you get another 30% for just baseline in the game. So you have 60% there. This makes it a 70% return. So heavy armor and resto stabs will give you the most back in return. Moving on to the last green tree, we have 33 into Tumbling. This should be 34. See, this is what I was talking about. Like, I changed a few things, and that's what I didn't want to do. Gosh. We're going to have to just do this. I don't know if this will work. Yep. So we'll just do that. and we'll do this. So we want this at 14. You want this at 14% reduced dodge roll cost, because then you get a 17% reduced dodge roll cost, or it's an 18%, I don't remember, because of the medium armor passive. And then we have 31 into Shadow Ward, which gives us a 13% block cost reduction. So going back over here, 14 into here, this will give you 9% bash cost reduction, and then 6 in here give you 4% sprint cost reduction. So you actually have like a 7% sprint cost reduction. And then moving on to the blue tree, we have 43 in the blast. This increases healing done. This is going to allow our rally to hit us for more in healing. And then we have 35 into physical weapon expert. We have this because it increases our light and heavy attacks by 20%. We do a lot of light and heavy attacks because we're not using a lot of abilities for damage, so we do a lot of light and heavy attack damage. So you want to boost that up as high as you can. We also have 40 into Mastered Arms. This increases your direct damage done by 16%. All light and heavy attacks, even with the two-handed, even though the two-handed has a cleave, the target you're facing, always facing, or you have your cursor on, will take direct damage from that, even though the light attacks and heavy attacks do cleave. The other reason why we have this is when we get an enemy below 25% health, we increase our damage from light and heavy attacks by another 5%. So we actually go up to 25% damage done, plus the 40 in direct damage, or the 16 in direct damage. So it actually comes out being pretty good. Moving on to the final blue tree, we have 43 in a Mighty. This increases physical poison, disease damage by 10%. This includes your light and heavy attacks. So that's why I have it set up the way I do. And then we have 40 into Thaumaturge. This increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. We have 56 into Precise Strikes. This increases critical damage and critical healing done by 20%. And then we have 13 into Piercing. This increases our physical penetration by 1,283. This is going to increase our damage capabilities against mobs in the Overland and in dungeons. So I do want to mention something about the Precise Strikes, why I have it there. Because the Templar also gets a passive called Piercing Spear. When you have an Aedric Spear ability slotted, you get extra damage or critical damage on those enemies by 10%. So that's why on the front bar we use Blazing Shield, is so we can get that extra 10% critical damage. So we actually get 30% more critical damage, and in reality it's 80%. So we get a lot more critical damage with using a Templar, and that makes our light and heavy attacks just do a lot of damage. So, alright, now that we've done the CP, skills, all the stuff, you guys know what I'm going to do next. I'm going to show you guys how this build works in action on a world boss. And like I said, this is one of the more tougher world bosses, because this thing just summons a ton of adds. So it's going to make not only our shield use really easy, because we're going to have a lot of shield strength, we're also going to deal a lot of damage, because we're going to be doing a lot of AoE stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing you want to do is make sure your rally is up and started. Next, when you get close enough, drop your resistance buff, AoE, and as you can see, I haven't even started using shields, and these guys are barely hurting me. Now we get to go around and fight a bunch of enemies off the side here. Like I said, you can get some massive shields out of this, because of how... And like I said, you just light attack mostly. I mean, if you need resources, you can heavy attack and it'll deal a lot of damage. Not a super large amount, but it can. And it's just mostly just keeping your shields up. If you can keep your shields up, you will never die, because it takes so long for these guys to bring your shields down. And it's really hard to see what's going on, so I'm going to go ahead and Dawnbreaker some of these guys. I'm just waiting for the boss to spawn. He hasn't even spawned yet. I'm just sitting here fighting his minions. And like I said, with the way the Nord works now, you get that 5 ultimate over so many seconds, and you get all this other stuff. It just makes them really powerful for this build. I love it, because I can just go in and just kill things. And I haven't even used my bow that much, and I'm not even using my resistance buff now because I don't need to. Alright, the boss is up. We're going to go ahead and start beating on him. I'm just going to bird him. Yeah, it's like I said, this build is just insanely OP. In my opinion, it's probably the strongest solo build there is in the game. Out of all the builds I've ever made, I mean, this one and the Nightblade can just go for hours because of their passives. DK isn't bad, but DK I prefer using Sword and Board because they get such great benefits from using that. I had to use a potion, guys. Look at that. Oh my gosh, because of my shields. Because he, like I said, you can pretty much just stand here against this guy and just take a beating. Because your shields can absorb so much damage, it's just ridiculous. Down some. I'm just trying to get rid of that shield, that ridiculous amount of shield strength he has. And there you go, Rally just almost maxed health me. It's ridiculous. Rally's just so OP, it's not even funny. But I mean, I can kill this guy 100 times. And like I said, the reason why he's so tough is because he has so many adds. And normally they'd be attacking me, but for some reason this guy seems to bug out every once in a while, so you have to like run out and like get the attention of his adds. There we go, there we go. Now we got a challenge. A real challenge. It was until I did this. And I got like 30k shields almost. Boom. Dawnbreaker them, they all just die. But like I said, this is probably the most powerful solo build I've ever played in the game. And it's because you have that minor maim, and you can see all the enemies that have minor maim on them, because they have that blue, smoky thing on them. So they're all applied with minor maim. So all the damage I'm taking is reduced when that's applied, so... Oops. made a mistake. And that's the only reason why I use potions, is if I make a mistake. And I wind up burning through a little bit too much, and like, resources. But he is one of the tougher world bosses. If you haven't fought this guy, I would suggest you try it. He's just, it takes a long time to kill him. One of the other world bosses that are really tough are the ones in Orsinium. Those are some really tough world bosses, and the ones in oh, I can't even think of what it's called. Morrowind. Some really tough bosses. But even when it comes to dungeon bosses, like, I can sit and just solo them, because this build just doesn't die. But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time fighting that boss. I don't want to make this video like 50 minutes or an hour, so I just thought I would show you guys that build, like, its true power, because it is a very, very powerful build. This thing just does not die. But yeah, that is pretty much it for the Lord Knight, guys. As you guys can see, one of the most powerful builds for solo play. This thing is like almost indestructible. There are some bosses you will have troubles with. I'm not gonna lie, if you're doing like solo Chuden, and it can be bad. But if you have a group, small group, like say 4 people, it becomes a lot easier. And if you want to set this up to tank, all you have to do is change out Crushing Weapon. That's it. It's the only ability you should really have to change out with the Undaunted Taunt. Inner Fire, and you can use either Morph, the Magic Morph, or the Stamina Morph. Use the Tri-Stat Food to give you the health, Magicka, Stamina. You do lose Recovery, but you're going to be doing a lot of heavy attacks anyways, and you're going to have a lot more Magicka. So you're going to have to make that trade-off if you want it to work out better. So, but that's pretty much it for the build, and you do not have to be a Nord. Nord just works best with the Selene set. If you're using any other race, like I said, I would suggest using the Bloodspawn. That's going to help you drop a lot more ultimates a lot quicker. You're going to lose some damage from the monster set, but it's a good trade-off for survivability. So, but that's it for the Lord Knight, guys. Hope you guys like it. If you do, you know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.